everyone. Hello. So today's guests, we have Frederick Rodrigues here with us. Fred is a transdisciplinary media artist, researcher, and educator based in Sydney. His creative work explores the intersection between living organisms and technological and social constructs, as well as the relationship between discrete technological entities. Frederick's works produces ideas, experiences, and media that are presented across galleries, performances, networks, circuits, and software systems. His work is critical of a world in which technology is used to extract, oppress, and dominate in the name of profit. And his work is also critical of the structures shaped by capitalism, imperialism, and colonization. So I welcome hereby my friend Fred to you guys. Without further ado, I would give the floor to Fred, and we are more than happy to hear from you.
Hi, everybody. First, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. I want to also, hang on, I'm just going to get myself set up and see. Uh, oh, it's been a while since I have zoomed properly. All right.
Um,
Now I can see the things that I need to see. My name is Fred, and as thanks also for the introduction. It's really nice to be here and to have some time with you. So I want to first acknowledge that I'm making this presentation from the lands of the Gadigal people. So you might know this as Sydney, Australia. So colonized land that has never been ceded. And uh, I can't see anybody. So every now and then it's really nice to know if anybody is there. You're welcome to interrupt me anytime and ask questions and stop me. Um, and I'll try to take regular breaks. I have a problem that I get kind of a little bit overexcited, and English is my first language, so I can go a little bit too quickly. Please stop me if if it's annoyingly fast and like I said, um, if you have any shorter questions, feel free to interrupt me as we're going, and we'll have some time for any questions at the end. Um, uh, yeah. So what I'm going to present today, and sometimes I will show slides, sometimes not. I will bring them on and off. I hope that you can all see a screen somewhere. I guess that's how it's all going to work. Um, so I'm going to kind of just introduce a little bit about what I do and how I work, and I'm going to go through a couple of smaller projects really quickly that kind of I think illustrate my practice in a nice way. And then I'm going to talk about my most recent research project in a little bit more detail, and that is I like I'm going to get into it in a second. So I will start off just with a bit of a broader introduction. I'm going to try and share my screen and see if I can make all of this work properly. Da, da, da. I think.
it's fine, take your time. But yeah, I also want to take this time to mention that it's 1 a.m. at where Fred is right now. So he was kind enough to do the talk right now for us. I think you got disconnected. Your mic is mute as well.
Okay, sorry. Let's try this again. Um, yeah, my internet chose a really great time to die. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna do this again. There we go. Okay, so yeah. I don't know where I get cut off. I'm just going to jump in where it feels comfortable. So I think that art and activism should be inside these digital spaces, and it should be mimic them. It should be able to deconstruct them, reflect them, and we should be able to kind of take the parts of these digital spaces and make them into new things. And working with technology, this covers a lot of territory. It might be, the entirety of the internet, electronics, human computer interaction, computation, video, audio, artificial intelligence. Um, I use technology from a kind of engineering perspective. I like to break it down and like, be able to deal with it and take it apart and put it back together in different ways. But it is really about, for me, about a creative process. So within my creative practice, I reassign tools and processes that might be purely technical. It might be writing software, it might be designing a circuit, and those are those become creative tasks for me. This for me aligns really well with the critical engineering manifesto. There is a QR code on the screen, and I am going to you can have a look at it yourself. I'm going to look at it myself, and you can't see because of the way my screens are working. But the Critical Engineering Manifesto is a kind of working group. It is made by some engineers, but basically is a really nice, I really like the manifesto. And basically is a kind of call to change the way engineers and people with technological skills deal with technology. So one of the most I think there's 10 points in the or 11 points in the manifesto. Um, but I think like overall it basically says that like, we should acknowledge that like engineering is the most transformative language of our time. Now that's a big call, but I do understand that like technology has probably had a huge influence on the way we live, the way politics works out, the way we're governed, the way we move through the world. And it's up to the critical engineer to study and exploit this language and expose its influence. I think one of the other things that I really, really like is that it's point 9 if you're looking at it. And it says the critical engineer notes that written code expands into social and psychological realms, regulates behavior between people and the machines they interact with. And and that is a real thing. So these little bits of technology become really serious influences on our lives and really serious influences on the way that we interact with each other. So where does that come for arts practice? And for me, so firstly, like um, this might like I don't want to annoy anyone. I probably will by this next statement. I'm sorry in advance. I'm going to make a bad analogy. But so I don't want to delegitimize anyone's work. But while, say, if I think of a painter, and I'm not a painter, I wish I could paint. I just can't. I just do not have that possibility of like looking at canvas and organizing my hand to make something that I want to make. It's not a thing that I can do. But I have friends that are, and I'm really, I think it's really amazing that they get to use a singular tool. They get to use a paintbrush for their entire creative process that might last 50 years or more, their entire lives, and they get to use the same tool over and over again. And not only that, there are manufacturers, the people who make paintbrushes and the people who make paint that are always trying to make better paint and better paintbrushes for artists to paint with. And I think that's really beautiful and really interesting, but that's not what happens for me. I choose technology and any little bits of technology, whether it be designing a circuit or writing software or the looking at the way a network works as the tools that I make art with. And so I have to repurpose them. They're not made for making art. It means a constant readjustment and a constant appropriation of tools that were not designed to be part of creative processes and finding ways to adopt them into a creative process. So and I'm not a Marxist, really. I mean, I like a lot of Marxist ideas, but I do like this picture, and I do like, for me, this kind of speaks to a little bit about the way that I see, you know, I see the tools of the internet, I see the infrastructure, and that is a, the internet is a place that is primarily concerned with making money. And I see that I can take those things, I can repurpose them, I can deconstruct them, and I can make my art with them. And I really like that idea that, I can make my art with hijacked tools from the bourgeois, as Marx would say. So, um, as a little aside to that, I also kind of believe that there's no such thing as being apolitical. I think that, if we choose to ignore the politics of the social structures or societies or systems or institutions we engage with, that in itself is a political act. And it kind of leads to the fact that I don't think there is anything like I think all art is inherently political. So I like to be aware of that when, when I try to make things or think about things. So I'll get back on track to talk about some of some work to kind of illustrate how this might work. So um, I talked about, repurposing the tools and mimicking the systems that we have. And here are some like, I guess like starting questions for me for a little experiment that I made. So is it possible to graffiti the internet? We can go to a train station, we could like get out a spray can, we might get in trouble, we might be seen, but how can we do the equivalent on the internet? It's quite difficult, and the internet's really locked up. And we don't get to, all of the ways that we get to communicate on the on the internet are really, really funneled and controlled and decided. But it doesn't have to be like that. Is there another way that we could be? What happens if we didn't have that kind of like you can only comment on this way and these hyper structured conversations? Are there opportunities for collectivism? And I think one thing that's really interesting is like the idea of public space. Like we kind of negotiate together how we behave in public space. We don't, everyone could just walk into public space and start yelling and screaming. But we kind of take turns and participate in public space in a way that, is, I guess, reflective of the society that we have built together. But we don't get that opportunity to negotiate that on the internet. It's already been pre-decided. Everything's been locked, and it's physically controlled in the way that we can, the way that we can access it. So I wanted to make a little experiment in another direction of public space, like what else could happen. So I'm going to show you on the next slide a QR code. If you have a phone, you can grab and scan the QR code and go there. I will ask everybody, if you go to this QR code though, don't do anything with it yet. It's got some buttons on the site that it takes you to, but just like don't actually do anything just yet. So here is the QR code. I'm gonna leave it there for a second. It's really great if you can scan it, and I will join you in a second. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and I have the same site open, and we can look at it together. If I get this screen sharing is kind of a bit of a pain. Okay, here we go. So it's a really, really simple thing. And all, like I said, all I wanted to do was make a kind of inversion of like the way that we can communicate and the way that like communication works and kind of the idea of a public work on the internet. So there's a button that says pick a color. Anyone, if you want now, can pick a color. And so it's kind of chaos in that like everybody is allowed to control this space, right? So it's quite different to the way that the normal internet works, which is all controlled from a singular point, and everybody kind of has to obey this. Now everybody's input goes everywhere. It is a bit like we're all yelling at each other, so of course we get this chaos. But it was just a really, really simple experiment to understand what other kinds of hierarchies and topologies we could look at in networks and what other possibilities that there are. And yeah, so I guess this isn't really it's not really a big artwork, but it is just a little interesting little experiment. Um, okay, so You are welcome to keep changing the colors. I will move on. So, okay, I'm gonna go share this other part of my screen. Sorry, I'll be clunky sometimes going backwards and forwards between sharing stuff. Okay, so still, I'm going to go back to the internet a little bit. I'm going to look at another project, but give it a little bit of introduction. So in the early 2000s, there was this idea that was a kind of popular with tech journalists that said like, if you don't have to pay for something, then you are the product that's being sold. And they were referring to things like Google Drive and and Facebook and Instagram and social media that they're free. We don't pay for them. They give us stuff, and then that we were being sold. Now that was 2005, and things have gotten a lot worse. So I really love this book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. It's a really, really interesting kind of takedown of, the information economy. So information and data about personal behavior is probably one of the most valuable resources that there is at the moment. And the best way for a company to collect data is to get as much engagement as possible. And that's to keep as many people looking at their app, engaging with whatever app that they've made, as long as they possibly can. Shoshana kind of explains this really in a really dark way. Here in this quote, it says Google a lot. You can swap that for Amazon, Facebook, Meta, TikTok, any of those kinds of companies if you want. But basically, we are not the subjects of value realization, nor are we, as some insisted, the product of Google sales. Instead, we are the objects from which raw materials are extracted and expropriated for prediction factories. Predictions about our behavior are the products and they're sold to the customers, not to us. So this is it's pretty dark, but basically, information is, we've seen that like it's made, like some of it's made a few people incredibly rich and it will continue to. And we are being mined. I mean, it's exactly like mining, except instead of digging gold out of the ground, it's digging information out of our behaviors. So the book is really amazing if you want to, it's very, very lengthy, but if you have the motivation to read it, it's a really interesting kind of takedown of, surveillance capitalism. So we've got this situation now where like that's the thing that wants to happen. Basically, these companies are just trying to get us to spend as long as possible on their app so that they can get as much money by selling our data as possible. And the logical next thing that is happening is that at the moment we've got phones and we put them down, and that's really problematic for these kinds of companies. They would love it if we never put our phones down, but like we need to hold them in our hands. And the next thing that's coming is already starting to appear. Eventually, it will be a pair of contact lenses that give you a kind of constantly always on the internet, augmented reality. We see them now with Meta's Ray-Ban glasses that kind of you can ask them questions. They film stuff. They show you some like overlays about that, give you some kind of overlaid information about the world. And these were born out of virtual reality. So these companies started making VR glasses and things like this and developing them further and further and further. And this will just get better until you never take it off, until you're always giving data. And it will also give you a kind of like, you know, a more exciting version of the world, the constant Instagram version of the world that you're in. So I was really interested about this kind of about this phenomenon and wanted to make something I wanted to make something about this. And what I made is this work called Sync. So it's a speculative fiction experience for two people and it's staged in a mediated future. So it is a bit like a science fiction story, except instead of just being a story, it is in the technology that it talks about. So it is talking about this. The proposal is that two protagonists have signed up for this kind of virtual reality experience where they're going to live their lives in the world. They'll get the contact lenses and it will make the world a better place. It will make everything tailored to their desires and their experiences. Imagine if you walked around the world and everything was just kind of manipulated to make you like it a little bit more, which is the way that we experience our kind of social media feeds at the moment. But in this kind of proposed little science fiction story, of course, when these people sign up for it, it actually kind of sucks and they don't like it. And it's a kind of crappy system. So they're stuck in this kind of like weird virtual world that isn't really that great. And then an even worse thing happens is that like people's personal data inside this company starts to leak and mess with each other. So your memories and your desires start to get mixed up with the database of someone else's desires, and eventually you get in this kind of messy thing where you're experiencing someone else's someone else's curated reality, which I guess is a bit like if you got, and I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but to like get someone else's, like if you use TikTok or Instagram or whatever your poison is, if you look at someone else's feed and experience like all the things that are tailored to, give somebody else all those little dopamine hits. Anyway, I will show you a little bit of this. So for me, part of this work that's really important is being able to make this experience with the same tools that were developed by these companies to kind of give you like, to build toward that idea of constant engagement. So the VR tools that are made by Meta and developed by Meta, and to be able to kind of usurp them and to make them into something that's also critiquing that. So I'm going to play a little bit of this video. Wait. I'm going to do I think I fucked up and didn't share the sound. I'm going to share the sound now. I go back here, share sound. Oh, okay. So, can you hear this and see it?
Yes.
Thanks.
A body I hadn't expected.
Between the sunset and the dawn, you'll lose everything. The place is lost.
Am I lost? At home, it felt like we'd lost too much to even call it that anymore. All burned out, mines and forests, plague times, no one for days.
You can still be of service. Up there, or where.
Yeah, I think you got freezed again. If you're saying something, I can't hear you.
Okay. Well, that is very annoying. Okay. I don't know how much of that came through. I'm going to move on. Um, so yeah.
You haven't
I'll,
been cut off for a long, like I think.
okay, cool. Um, yeah. Uh, so, uh, where to go? Okay. So there was, I guess, like part of that is that it's science fiction. I really like science fiction and speculative fiction. I think they're really interesting methods of storytelling. And I I really enjoy kind of playing with this. And I guess particularly like um, there is science fiction kind of does this thing where you can take a kind of like, a proposal, a premise, and then, some part of a future that's a little bit different from now, and then play it out and see what would happen if this was to be the truth or if this was to come into play. Um, and one of the cool things about fiction and science fiction is that actually we use them in quite a lot of other um, context as well. So we use fiction in science as well. So this line here, um, 13.8 billion years ago, an unimaginably dense and hot singularity expanded, creating all matter, energy, space, and time. And this is from 1927. This is what we call the Big Bang Theory, but it's essentially as a story. We don't know that it's true, but it's a cool story and it works. And at the moment, it doesn't have any real kind of conflict. We can't prove that it's right or wrong, but it really works for us and it helps us to understand the universe. The next little sentence there is that the brain's hollow ventricles house five internal senses: common sense, imagination, estimation, memory, and cogitation, and each is responsible for integrating, storing, and processing sensory and abstract information. Now, that's kind of weird to think that there's five little hollow things in your brain that like are the things that decide how you think. And like, that seems a little bit ridiculous to us now, but in about 1,000 years ago, this was the cutting edge of science, and this was a story that we totally believed and worked really well and helped us to really understand it. That was from Avicenna. And so it is really important to understand that even these things that, even like, I guess the most thought about science is essentially just a story, and at some point in time, it's highly likely that it will be overturned. So I really like this kind of crossover that we get between like pure fiction and actual science, and and what that can mean for us. So I'm going to read one more of these, and it says epigenetic inheritance. So this is when you can like uh, inherit genetic changes that have been through experiences from past, from like your ancestors. So epigenetic inheritance states that environmental stresses and behaviors can change gene expression, and some of these changes can be passed on to offspring. So this is a current real scientific like theory that people are investigating, that like if your ancestors got really stressed out, it might have changed their DNA and you might have inherited that. Now, the next part of that is this means that ancestral experiences are coded into our DNA, and through this, we could access the memories and experiences of our genetic predecessors. Right? That is a logical extension of that, except that second part is just the plot of the movie Dune. So like it's I really like that those crossovers and similarities that like that we can have these kind of like real scientific things that are also like slightly unbelievable, and fictions that also relate to science. And the project that I want to talk about next is really trying to play in that space, to try and play in that space between something that's really plausible, something that's really scientific, and something that's also, totally made up and playful. Um, So one of the things, the other parts of like little fictions that I really like that are also really remind me of science fiction are simulations. So we simulate stuff all the time. We simulate like the weather. When you look at a weather forecast, we don't like it's a real, it runs a whole bunch of like it is like a science fiction story. It says like, oh, if this and this happen in 3 days, it will rain or not rain. We also use the simulations to say for like, the Google Maps tells us that we found the shortest route. And if you follow this, then, you will get there the quickest. Now, the cool thing and weird thing about those simulations is that we never really know how accurate they are. Like if Google Maps says this is the fastest route, you will save 6 minutes by going this way. You take that way, you didn't take the other way, so you don't know actually if it was faster or not. And quite often the same thing happens with the weather. Like we don't, how often do you look back and at the weather forecast and check it against whether it was accurate or not? You just kind of accept it. You look at the weather and you're always a little bit skeptical, but you just kind of do it. So I really like the way that we use and integrate and accept these simulations that are expressions of these kind of like possibly fictional ideas that we use to make science. So the project that I'm going to talk about now is called synthetic ornithology. And basically, the idea of the work is to create an interactive installation that generates birdsong from a future climate disaster. That is it. So now, if I had the idea for that work sort of with that sentence, and now I'm going to work back and tell you how it was made, and we'll have a look at the bit at the work at the end. So it is speculative fiction. It is a story of a future, except instead of using any words at all, what it does is it makes sound recordings from an environment, a proposed and theoretical simulated environment in a future, and we can listen to them now. And that's what the installation does. And to do that, I used what many people use to make a simulation, and that's a machine learning model. So machine learning is a kind of subset of artificial intelligence, which is really just a big name for data science. And I designed and trained this model so that it could make these soundscapes from these unknown futures. And again, now I'm deeply stuck in using a whole bunch of technology to make work, and technology that's not designed for making art. Like I'd never studied data science before, so I spent quite a lot of time working out how to make a machine learning model that could make audio and believable audio and stuff that sounded like birds and insects. And it was rewarding but not really fun. And now I'm stuck with this thing, like, not, quite often if you're a sound artist and you make work, you open up all sorts of tools and synthesizers to, tools that are made for making art to be able to change the sound of your work. But for me, I was really stuck and strict with this idea that I would only make this work as a simulation. So the only way that I could have any artistic control over the work, over the sound and the content of the work, was just to change the way this machine learning model worked, which was, I don't necessarily advise it. This is really like the annoying thing for me and the way that I make my work, but it was really interesting, and I liked the limitations of that. So a big part of this is that this machine learning model is plausible. Like, so it is a possible way. I developed the model with the same principles that scientific research would use, and it could be true. And it's not necessarily true, but like it could be. And for me, one of the bits of research that kind of really aligned with me is the idea of parafictional art. And parafictional art, I think, like in this little quote talks about it quite well, but I think that last sentence is really important for me. So simply put, with various degrees of success, for various durations, and for various purposes, these fictions are experienced as facts. So just for a little while, I want my installation to seem like it's true, even if that only lasts 5 seconds. That's a really important thing for me, is to make this construct and to make this work that you're like, wait, is this real? Just like, that's just enough. And it's not real. It also is a nice experience when you understand that it's not real, but that parafictional part for me is really, really important. And within that, there are a couple of implications for that. So I want to skip, I'm going to have a look at, let's see if this will work. This is another piece of like kind of parafictional art that I really liked, and it has that same kind of science fiction thing. It's called the modular body. Oh, wait. Am I sharing sound? Probably not.
I didn't hear it, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't press the button. Share sound. Anyway, you can also find this, but it's a cool little clip.
We're looking at Oscar, the first human modular prototype that is able to live in various setups. Now what's going to happen is that I'm going to connect the brain to the heart modules, to activate the blood circulation. Now, the lung is going to start breathing. You can see both organs are now collaborating. I can add a kidney module. And if I add a limb module, I start actuating the organism to move. Now it's looking for the optimum temperature.
Okay, it's kind of weird and gross, but I really like it. And like this work is a little bit dated, but when it came out, people really believed it. And it got in the press quite a lot. It was like, republished that like someone had made this kind of 3D printed body parts that joined together. And this is really interesting. But the big thing about this work and quite a lot of like work that also engaged in parafiction, this is just a video. So no one has to interact with it. It only needs to be a representation, a recording of something that looks real. So if I want to make an interactive work that is also parafictional, I've got some more tasks to do, and I need to make things a little bit more believable. And within that, things need to be kind of like super real. So I'm sure probably have heard of like photorealism and hyperrealism in art, where people are making like pictures that are indistinguishable from reality, or indistinguishable from photographs. So I then understood that I needed to do this with sound. I needed to make this sound, this fake sound from these future soundscapes, so believable that you couldn't really tell it apart from real recordings, that it was really convincing. Um, and within that journey, I really, really liked the idea of some from Jean Baudrillard's and his idea of this simulation, because now I'm simulating this future. And, he writes a lot on the way that simulation works in society, and that, the kind of media and advertising and social media are simulated realities. They're better than real. And what happens then is that we have this really weird system where we've got people aspiring to a reality that is not real, and this kind of feedback loop of like, advertising mimicking this perfect reality, and then people mimicking advertising, and then perfect reality getting bigger and weirder, and this constant like endless loop. And we start to simulate realities that have never been real and will never be real. Um, and then within this kind of realm as well, I really like the work of Patricia Piccinini, and I think this image became a kind of nice target for me while I was thinking about the sound. Like how, like here we have this is a sculpture. It's super realistic. It's a really, really beautiful like sculpture, and all of the hairs, everything is really like perfect on this guy, but he's holding this weird mutant fish, which is like also like very, very real, but like also like super abject and strange. And I was like, okay, that's going to be my target. How can I do that with sound? So I went through the process of understanding how to make a generative model, and basically like what I needed to do was collect a huge number of bird songs, and I needed them to have the location, the climate conditions, and the time of day and the day of year that they were recorded. And then I could design this machine learning model that starts to learn how these changes in climate change affect the bird song. And then when that's done, the machine learning model can synthesize new birdsong based on climate conditions. So I will be able to give it some set of climate conditions and data, and it will simulate this future climate for me. And it's learned all its data from existing birdsong, so it should be really real, but it will also do weird stuff because it's not perfect. Um, and yeah, that's basically my plan. Uh, so here, I'm going to skip through because I realized that I'm going a little bit slower than I was before. Okay, I want to show you just a really quick bit, something that really helped me to understand, like, we're using a lot of AI. People are using it. Some people are using it to make art. It's a complicated and sometimes not very well understood uh, tool, but I found something that helped me really understand some stuff about generative AI, and it's going to be this. And when I work out how to share it, here it is. Okay, This is a kind of like little diagram of what is the most simplest generative AI. So we've seen those things that can generate images. You type some like description in, and then it will say like, "Oh, I want an image of a cat flying to the moon," and it will make you the image of the cat flying to the moon. This is a really, really basic kind of explanation of how these artificial intelligence models work. So what we can see here is a square, and this square is basically we see these different colors, and they've organized all of these different pictures into what is most similar. And all these, this model has just been trained on pictures of hand-drawn numbers. So it's just people have drawn numbers, and there's thousands and thousands of hand-drawn numbers. They're all black and white, and the AI model here learns the distribution of them. So what it does is just organizes them into the ones that are most similar. So you can see here now I'm moving through all of the zeros, and it's everybody's different shaped zeros. But as I move out to the edge of zeros, I get to sixes because that's the next most common thing is a six. And then if I move here, I'm going to get to twos. I should get to eights here because they're also common. Now, what happens if I go here? I've now landed in a spot that's somewhere in between them. And this model, because it understands what would be next, it understands those features of what would be between the 0 and the 2. It gives me something between a 0 and a 2. So this kind of it's this kind of thing that I'm hoping to exploit because I don't have any actual recordings of the future. I only have recordings of now, but I want to make recordings of the future. So what I'm going to do is exploit this little bit of a generative model where I can say, you know what this would sound like, and you know what this would sound like. So give me what this would sound like. And it sort of does it. Um, so stopping the screen sharing and swapping it to a different one. Sorry, this is always a little bit clunky. All right, so I will go with a little bit more detail for this. So what we see here is what we just looked at was something called unsupervised learning because there was no, it took all of the images and arranged them just by itself. It just said, here are the ones that are like each other, here are the ones that are not like each other, and we'll, put the ones that are like each other closer and the ones that are dislike each other further apart. Now, when we use supervised learning, so that's when we have a little bit more information about attached to our data. And so in this case, I had more information attached to my recordings because I have GPS locations, I have times of day, I have the day of year. So we start to arrange those things based on those categories as well as their own internal features. So I've kind of now understanding a structure that I need to make, and I need to understand, I'm starting to understand what the model needs to look like. Now I need to get the data. So what I ended up with collecting was about 45,000 recordings. And I got them mostly from some libraries that I managed to get access to. They're all mono and they all sound really, really different. So they're like quite a lot of them are generated, are like, when we say citizen scientists, so people have recorded them, uploaded them, tagged them with the location and time. Um, and uh, so sometimes there's people talking in them, sometimes there's people walking around in them, and like lots of really different kinds of qualities. Now, the footsteps I really, really love because when you hear a recording with footsteps in it, you can kind of imagine that you might be the person walking through that place. And one of the cool things is if you design and train a generative model, it takes all of the features that are in your data set and they can appear in the real thing. So when my generative model makes soundscapes from this future, sometimes they have footsteps in them. So I get this person, the sound of a person walking through a future that may or may not have happened yet and sort of sending the sound back to me, which I really like. As part of this process, I uh, this is really clunky. As part of this process, I wanted to make a way to kind of visualize the data that I have, the collection of audio files. So this is it. I made this website, and these are all of the recordings. So they're all from Australia. Um, and there's quite a good spread. It travels across the whole country. And for any of these recordings, you can kind of click on one and you can play them. And we can also filter them and say, I only want the ones that are between 20 degrees and 40 degrees, and it will show you only those. So you can sort of have some inclination of what the data set looks like and how it's reacting to climate. Okay, so as I trained the model, uh, sharing always. As I trained the model, it started to learn these sounds. And like one of the things about Australia is Australia has more singing birds than any other country in the world. I lived away from here, and every time that I would come back to Australia, it was completely insane. Like you wake up in the morning and there's like this ridiculous cacophony of birds that sound like they shouldn't exist, just like singing like crazy every day. And so here I have a collection of really, really strange sounding birds. And if you are Australian, then these seem a little bit more possible. Like you might know what's wrong with them. I don't think if you're not familiar with them, I think it doesn't really work. I think when I play these, you'll just be like, that's just weird, or I don't know, or maybe it sounds real. For people who are familiar with them, they're kind of odd. So these are some of the, for me, just like little interesting things I collected from the generative model. Um, and this is one of my favorites. And these are like these birds. The thing about these birds is that they might be like, they might be real. Um, we have things that sound like this in Australia. So they are just kind of like little mutant versions of those. As part of this whole process, I also wanted to kind of check how well I was making these kind of simulated bird songs, like how well they were coming out. So I did this survey with about 400 listening tests where I asked people to tell me if they thought the birds were real or fake. And like mostly these are the results here, and mostly like people couldn't tell the difference between the real and fake ones. So I was on the right track to making my kind of like simulation of the future. Now, I've got I like did all of this kind of work and I've trained this model and I've got this thing that can make bird sounds, and it makes bird sounds based on a future set of circumstances. So you can tell it where, you can tell it when, and you can tell it what the climate is like, and then it will make you this kind of it will make you this synthetic, this synthesized, futuristic, speculative audio fiction, but I have to turn it into an installation, and now I don't get, I've got, if I go back to the idea that I wanted to make this parafictional thing, that I wanted to make people believe that it was real for a second, the only thing that I've got left to influence how people do it is just basically what the installation looks like and what the installation sounds, what the interaction looks like, because it does let you pick things. So it uses a really, really basic, like, the same kind of tools. Like I didn't want it, I wanted to stop it looking like a art exhibition and look like a kind of science, like some kind of science exhibition. So I went to quite a lot of length just to make it use normal maps. Um, Here we have I looked it up. We have a museum in Australia called Questacon. It's like a science museum for like that has lots of interactive installations. And I looked it up, but I forgot the name of it. There is one in Frankfurt as well. You have something similar. And I guess like I really wanted to say like this is the style that I was going for. It's real, like it doesn't look like an art show. It looks like a the whole thing is designed to look like a some kind of like science installation in an educational museum. And that's like, like all of this is just to achieve that couple of seconds where you feel like, oh, this might be real. This might be a simulation of, of something from the future. And, it has this, exactly the same kind of like lit signage with instructions and things like this. And proposes that it's real, that it actually can simulate the future, but it can't. Um, and part of that process as well is that when you it's that process of kind of like reinforcing and trying to influence how people view the work and how people hear that sound, was also reinforced by here. There is a kind of some generative text that runs based on the future scenario. So I think I am getting to the point where like I can try to show you the outcome of this work. And then I think I'm kind of, my time is also going to be up. So, all right, let's see. So this is I guess what I can show you is just the interface running on my laptop. Obviously, it's not the whole installation, but I want to try to show you a little bit of a run through of how it all works. So let's see. I didn't. I'm gonna do it in a sec because I didn't share the sound. Okay, now it's done. And all right, see if I can make this work. Okay, so this is what you see in the on the screen in the work, and I will choose a place close to where I am now. And I can choose a future time and date. So I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to go to 2041 and May. So it's still nice and warm because our seasons are reversed down here in Australia. And let's go for morning time. I want 7 a.m. when there's lots of birds singing. Whoops. And here I can choose the temperature. I'm going to make it a little bit unusually hot for a May morning. And so here it starts to construct this kind of sci-fi story around this future date. And this is, again, this is another like artificial intelligence model, but this is kind of instructed to join this like kind of speculative future. Yeah, this text, the text that is generated text is there to kind of like provide a bridge between this, like between now and the speculative future and that speculative climate conditions that anybody has chosen to kind of like make a little bit more of a like, to frame that sound again as, something that could be from a plausible future. Um, so I've shown the work a few times and it's been quite nice. It's been really interesting to see how people react to it. One of the things that I think the outcome of the work that I found was that I think I thought that people wouldn't believe it. And one of the main things that happened is I found that people were complaining that it wasn't accurate enough because they would say things like, I grew up in this area and at 7 o'clock there's always these birds. And I was like, oh, it was not meant to be that serious. It wasn't meant to be perfectly accurate. It is just a kind of playful work. Yeah. Okay, I think I kind of, I mashed that up a little bit and it's now been an hour, so I think I probably ate into the question time. Is that right?
Well, that was really interesting. Yeah, we have like 4 minutes. If anybody has any questions, please write in the chat or open your mic. Like you can also, yeah, ask yourself. Otherwise, thank you so much. It was really interesting. I'm really excited to experience the work, to get my hands on, to see like, but I mean, yeah, that's kind of true that it is coming from your personal, like, lived experience of living in the city, the place with the bird song. So for me, it was like, 2041 with all the things that happened, there's still a lot of nice, birds singing. So I never actually had an experience of being in there. Yeah, for me, it's like, yeah, that's a morning. Yes, true.
Yeah, yeah, the birds here are very weird and they're very much an intense part of our life. So yeah, I think it is difficult to show it to show it in an international context. And it will be in Finland in a couple of weeks. I'm really curious as to like if it makes sense at all to anybody. Yeah.
Gorgeous. So I had some notes, but I think like for 3 minutes it's gonna be a little bit, like the time is kind of less to get to them. For the last, like, for the last bit of the presentation, which was like about the work specifically, I was also interested in like, the way that you formulated the, structure of your research. Like, did you work from like, with the archive that you had access to, or did you find your way into like, you had the idea and then you got to finding the right tools and the archives? Or was it something that, how is the process for you happening? Is it the one way, like the materials available, or the other way around?
No, the archive came later. So I thought actually that I would record all of those bird sounds. I didn't realize how many I would need. And I really pictured that I would spend a year of my life just recording birds. And I thought that was a very, very nice idea and very pleasant. But it turned out that I needed so many birds and I needed birds from so many different places to make it work that I couldn't record it. So then I went to the archive afterwards. And then it became a really, then the archive started, to give me so much. Sorry, the birds just started again. Um, yeah, then the archive started to give me so much because, like, as I started to explore it and find all these like, really personal recordings, like, every single one was made by a person, and some of them were done really scientifically, but some of them it's just like someone walking along with a smartphone, and it's like really a record of like someone's experience being in a place, not just the recording of a place.
Mhm. There was this sentence that you said somewhere in your talk, like the work that you did was rewarding, not fun, but not fun. Like I guess that comes down to all the, artworks that the people make generally, like, even not artists. That is like, something that is necessarily not gonna be as fun if it is gonna be rewarding, or is it gonna be fun but not necessarily rewarding? So, like, was it the case for you? Did you actually record any bird songs at the end of the day? Was it fun or was it rewarding?
I had fun, but I mean, like, I have a really particular, like, weird, possibly idea of what fun is. It isn't the same fun as like going to a party or like, I used to play music. That was a really interesting way to be creative. You could just pick up an instrument and it would go. This is a very convoluted process. It's very, very rewarding and it is fun, but it's not like, it's not the kind of fun that I can see some people have with their arts practice. I think they're like I should look to have more fun in my practice. I think it would be better for me too.
Okay, on that note, I wish you all the fun in your future projects. Thank you so much for your time and for the talk. It was really nice to have you, and I hope to see more of you in the
Yeah.
academy.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody. Thanks for your time.
Have a nice rest, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
bye.
right.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.